Hey,
And you are now live.
thank you, Aisha. Welcome everyone to this evening's FBS Chat. I'm really pleased to have Mark. Is it Beyebach?
Yeah, Beyebach. Yes,
Beyebach
Beyebach.
from Navarre in Spain.
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant. And my co-host Mark McCurgo from Edinburgh. Thank you,
Hi,
Mark.
everyone.
And Gil from Columbus, Ohio.
Hello,
So
everyone.
thank you so much for joining me tonight. I usually start with how Mark, you first came across solution-focused brief therapy.
Well, that was in, I think, 1987, and I was finishing my degree in psychology. A lot of stuff that I didn't find too appealing, a lot of psychodynamic therapy then, or behavioral cognitive therapy. And I had the previous year found out about a training that was run in the city I was studying, which was a brief family therapy training. And that was very much, I would say, strategic, structurally oriented, and I liked that. I really liked that. So it was like more active. Things would happen, and it was a very, very good training indeed. But it was very much problem focused, very much MRI, strategic, Minuchin also, etc. And in my second year of training, I came across this paper by Steve and his team, solution focused development, the 1986 paper, Family Process.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that, and I mean, I was just a student by then, but I felt like, wow, this is very different from what I'm learning here, what we're doing here, but it's also very similar. So I made the mistake of sharing the paper with my teachers then. I said, oh yeah, you're right, sounds good. Could you please translate it for us? Not read English. So I did translate that, and they also found it very close to what they were doing, and they started to entertain these solution-focused ideas, and that led to me later reading In Search of Solutions, the work by Michelle Weiner Davis and Bill O'Hanlon. And again, we found that very useful, my trainers and my fellow students and me. And that led to me contacting Michelle Weiner Davis to invite her to come over to Salamanca, where I was doing this training, to give us a workshop or something. And she said, "Oh, like oh, Spain is so far away, and I don't think I can make it. But I have this nice colleague, Steve Shazer. He might be willing to go." So yes, he came to Salamanca, and it was like, wow. So this is what they wrote about, and he shared his videos, etc. And we saw that. I mean, that was the real stuff. We were like introducing in our problem focused use. Well, a little bit asking about exceptions, a little bit like trying to look at the other side of the moon. But when we saw Steve's videos, we found out that this was how we were supposed to do it, and that led to me 1 year later going to Milwaukee, and they had Steve and Insoo and the team. They had a wonderful intensive 1 month intensive training program, and wow! I mean that was really a life-changing experience for me. It was really, I mean, it's the best training I've ever taken, and I've done many trainings with many people in the family therapy field and therapy in general. Really good training, lovely atmosphere. I mean, really hands-on. I mean, I remember the second day I was there, I was struggling with my English, and they asked me to do a live interview there with a family with this very heavy accent, But it was really hands-on. You were watching cases all day, and then the trainees were doing the sessions also, and I was absolutely stunned. I mean, I that was what I did. Definitely fell in love with the approach, and it was so elegant. I mean, this use of language, and then seeing people change there in the sessions, and seeing second and third sessions, and that basically the thing was done. It was really, really, really amazing, and I think it had a really lasting impact on me. First, as a therapist, because I really had this feeling of this is the kind of therapy that fits me best. So clinically, since then, I see myself as a solution-focused therapist, a solution-focused, flexible, integrative, but solution-focused therapist. But I think I also implicitly learned the best way to train solution-focused therapy. I mean, no theory, of course. Practice, role plays. Watch a session, watch sessions, do sessions, which is what I then have replicated in the trainings that I run, in the workshops that I do, in what we have done at the university. I think that the other very important input is that Steve was so encouraging of research. So he always he was really like he pushed you and said, yeah, you do more research, and I think this interest that Steve had in change and in documenting change and in finding out what works and not, that stayed with me. So that's the way I fell in love with solution-focused therapy. It's a long time ago. It was 1992, I think, when I was there training with them.
You said earlier about the course that you were doing wasn't appealing. The was it the psychology course wasn't. What appealed to you mainly about the solution focused way of working?
I think because it's, I mean, a university degree in Spain in psychology in the 90s. It was all theory about how people are, about what pathology is, about problems, and almost nothing about how to change things. And I mean, I became a psychologist because I wanted to help people, basically, and I wanted to help people to change things. And so brief family therapy was very change oriented, but then solution focused even more in my view. And I think sometimes nowadays I think this is a little bit forgotten. It's like sometimes there's like the risk that we try to conduct beautiful sessions and beautiful conversations, but for me it's very clear that Steve was in the business of change, and he's part of this strategic brief therapy tradition. And I mean that because it's helping people to change, but also doing this from a very respectful position, like this, from one step behind, just by asking questions. I mean, I'm maybe because I'm German and I grew up in Spain, and so I was like kind of bilingual very early. I have this fascination with language, and so how by asking questions and asking them in certain ways and using the language of the client, how you can really help people improve their lives. Well, this is still, it's a mystery for me. I mean, it's I still don't really figure out how the hell it works.
That's great.
Well, I mean, I was guys, if you have a question, I mean, you said wow a couple of times, Mark.
Yeah, that's Insoo.
I've noticed that, and that was Insoo was always say wow. What were your wow moments in particular? Do you recall any that changed the way you saw clients? Because I mean, you know, there is that thing in the medical world that if we don't know a client's past, how can we really help them to, you know, they have to accept and then move forward. Whereas we're almost saying, let's just move forward. Do you see what I mean? I don't know if that question is a question.
Yeah, I mean, this whole shift that you talk about preferred futures, and in some cases, even without having not a clue what the problem is, what it might be, that is enough to help people change. That's what impresses me still, and I think it's really much in keeping with modern psychology also, that we are influenced by our past, but we are also driven by our futures, by our expectations, etc. And so this future orientation, I think that was what was most powerful for me on the one hand, and then also the other aspect of being aware that the clients have resources, and not only paying like lip service to that idea, which in family therapy you hear also, oh, families have resources, family are strong, but to really use techniques and questions to bring that to the fore in the very first session. So, I mean, this idea of that you try to disappear from the life of your clients as soon as possible, as Insoo would say, try not to leave footprints on their shore. That's very appealing for me. I don't like this position of the therapist who knows better. You know, in German, have this word besser wissen, besser wissen. So the therapist always knows best. I don't like that. I don't like people telling me how I feel or how I should feel, or no. And so to act from this position of curiosity and like really going from behind, that's impresses me a lot. And that's why I say that when I came back to Salamanca, my first thing was, will this work in Spain? I mean, this very like American way of doing therapy. And I have had some doubts, and my fellow colleagues were a bit skeptic also. So we started to do it very radically. There was a moment in time when we would toss a coin at the beginning of a session, the first session, and if it was heads, then we would try to do pure solution focused. If it was tails, we decided to do pure MRI style. And we did. I mean, it was not real research, but we did this for some time, and we found out experientially that it worked in Spain too. And then we set out to do some very basic research. I mean, just the pre-post studies. So, which in the 90s was, I mean, 90s, that's 2000, I think. It was okay, but for us it was enough. It was not sophisticated research, no randomized control trial or whatever. But it helped us to really see that the people we were working with this approach were changing in not many sessions, with not more relapses than in a problem-based approach. For me, this was a preoccupation. I think one of the thing that is missing in the solution-focused literature is relapse and relapse prevention. I think it happens. We know it happens. I mean, research tells you that in all types of psychotherapy, with all types of presenting problems, people have this very disgusting habit to relapse. But we found out that we had more clients who, the follow-ups up to 3 years later, had more improvements. That was like 40%, I think, of the clients. And people who relapsed, it was much less. It was like 10%. So for us, it was good enough to say, well, yes, it works. And then from there, I mean, besides doing clinical work, I think our research oriented towards trying to see in what other context it worked, in child protection and in the medical context with nurses. So we have trying to find out how it works there in different contexts outside of family therapy. And then we have done a number of projects, always underfinanced, always very small, because we basically have been trying to answer the questions that were of interest for us. So try to find out how it works, and also what the limits are, what happens when it does not work so well, what happens when there are no changes, and you need maybe to deconstruct and dialogue the situation. So yeah, so from that point, I think 90% of my research is on solution-focused therapy, but in very different contexts. So it's a very incoherent research curriculum, but at the same time, it's focused on the thing that is a passion for me.
And so maybe before we get to the research, Mark, I have a question for you about Spanish context. When I got into the solution-focused world in the early 90s, it seemed to be full of Germans and Dutch and Swedes and Poles and what we might call Northern European people. And then somebody said, oh, but there's somebody in Spain. And then someone else would say, yes, but he's German. So I'm just wondering if you've worked a whole life in Spain with Spanish colleagues, with Spanish clients. Have you got a take on this kind of northern and it still seems to me there are fewer people from the south of Europe involved in the solution-focused world, Italy, Spain, Greece. There are people, of course there are, and they're increasing. But to begin with, it seemed like a really Northern European thing.
Yeah.
Do you have a thought about that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's what happens is that solution-focused practice in Spain is really done. It's done a lot, I think, in part because my colleagues, Marga Herrero or Alberto Rodriguez in Malaga, we have been training hundreds of people in the approach, but they're not very visible. And for the one thing, they're not very visible at the EBTA conferences, for instance. Mm-hmm. Even the 2 conferences we organized in Salamanca, we had all the Swedes, of course, enthusiastic Swedes and all the all the Brits coming in, but we had not many Spaniards. But not because they were not interested or not doing it, but because Spaniards tend to be very shy about speaking English. I mean, and most of them can read in English, but here it has been horrible how English has been taught at schools, and so for my colleagues it's difficult to communicate in English and to do presentations and congresses, etc. And that's not just in solution focus. I think it's in psychology in general. So I don't know about Greece or Italy. I think in Italy or Greece you have fewer solution-focused practitioners. But here in Spain, you have many people who identify with solution-focused therapy. And then you have even many more who use parts and bits of it. That said, I think some of the interviewing techniques of the questions, they come more naturally in English than in Spanish. And I also do therapy in German, and in German it's I think even a bit worse. So I mean, you ask how do you cope? It's like 3 words in English. In German you need much longer sentences, and in Spanish it's also not. So I think it comes more fluently in English, and that was my worry when I came after my training in Milwaukee. When I came back to Salamanca, it was let's see how it works in this language, but it works perfectly well. So it's I think I don't know. I hope that EBTA will happen in Tenerife sooner than pretty soon, and I hope we'll get more Spanish people there. If Tony Medina and his team manage to get the translation or something that encourages people. Yeah,
Mark, you mentioned. Well, you've obviously in your publications, you've done a fair number of randomized controlled trials, it seems, especially for solution-focused therapy. And you just said that you haven't had a lot of funding for that. So I just curious as how you've been able to pull that off with not a lot of funding, but also with the challenge with randomized controlled trials, the logistics, having access to participants, clients, and the ethics, the human subjects aspect of it. So I'm just wondering how you've been able to be so successful at doing that.
Well, I think my team and I have been doing more process research, really, on the one hand, or now we have done some studies on the impact of specific questions. The randomized controlled trials, I mean, some of them, we did I was just a participant in a study done in Chile, for instance, with patients with a diagnosis of somatoform disorder. So patients who have medical complaints, but no organic base is found. And so they're dissatisfied basically with the service they're getting. Plus they take a lot of resources. I mean, because they
can be some of the most challenging to work with.
Very challenging. And so that was my dear colleagues, Patricio Torres and Nieves Shade, and they got very good funding from the Chilean government, very good funding. So I was able to go to Chile and train them, etc. Together, Matthew was also there. That was very, very heavily funded, really. And then I think the other really big study that we have been doing is a study by Tony Medina, and that was funded by the EBTA, So it got a little bit research money from the EBTA and from the Spanish Family Therapy Association, just enough to train people. We were not able to pay Angie Tournell to come over, so it had to be me in the end who trained the professionals. But we only now are getting the big results. So it's right now it's submitted for publication. That's a very big study over 3 years with 500 families, with 150 professionals. Very well done. I mean, all the merit. Tony Medina's, and but we published some initial results on how the professionals changed. Very interesting. Social workers, psychologists, family educators, when they changed their view towards a more solution-focused view, they not only started to feel they got better results and to feel more competent, but also their burnout went down. And it went down in spite of the financial crisis we had then in Spain, so that some people were sacked. So it was less professionals working with more users, and even so their burnout went down. So I think we published that 2014. But then the data of the families, because we ran out of funding, and because we had this big crisis, and because Tony had to do a lot of assistential work, then it stagnated for I think 4 or 5 years. So only now we have the results, which are amazing for me. I mean, extremely good results with these 150 professionals. We did like 2 groups, experimental group and control group. Tony took data for 1 year, then I came in and trained the experimental group, and then they got also some supervision.
Were you able to like randomly select or assign the therapist?
Yeah, well, not clients, but what we did is we did like a block assignment. So we had 2 equivalent blocks of teams. So we tried to balance that, the size of the towns. And this is child protection, which is very difficult context to get all the permissions. So again, Tony, he's a great diplomat. So he managed to get all the permissions, all that. And then after 1 year, he took data again. And then the control group, they got the training also. So it was like crossover design. And then again, 1 year later, data again. So we had so many data that it was very difficult. So it took some years.
Sorry, Joe, can you pick your phone for me? Is that your phone ringing?
That's mine, I think.
Oh, is it? sorry, Mark.
Gil.
From over 3,000 miles away, my phone's ringing.
Hopefully nothing serious. So as I was saying, this was an example of some funding, but not enough to really then process the data at the speed that we had wanted to. So I hope that next year we will get those data published, because they're really, I think, really impressive. They're really very good. Not only in terms of the families reaching their goals more and with fewer sessions, but also then having fewer kids taken away from their homes, and also recidivism getting down. So really impressive results. I think in part because Tony was very good in getting everyone involved and very enthusiastic about the approach. But comparing the solution focus group with the treatment as usual, very, very clear differences. In fact, I suspect they're too good. So I guess the reviewers are really they will be very hard on it, because it's. But I think it's really very rigorous and well done. So like that, with some money sometimes, most often not. And then spending many hours. I've spent years, but this was when I was a doctoral student. I spent, I think, 3 or 4 years just transcribing sessions, hours and hours, then coding those sessions. But I think it was a lot of work. It was late night usually, but it's also a lot of learning, because you have all these conversations and all these questions in your head all the time. Yeah. And so I guess I would do it again. Although now I'm happy that now I have students who are willing to do that for me at the university.
That's always helpful. That's where having money comes in.
Yeah.
So, folks, I'd just like to draw your attention to the website at the bottom of the screen here, which is Mark and his team's website, aetsb.org. If you go there, you'll find the research papers are all there, I think, or at least many of them are. They're there for download. And the website itself is in Spanish. When I logged in a few minutes ago, Google offered me to translate into English, which makes it much easier to navigate. And many of these research papers are there in PDF. You can download them. They're usually written in English, I think. And it's a wonderful resource to tap into. So, Mark, you published a few years ago a paper that was called the summary of the Salamanca research. I suggest people read that, and I don't want you to summarize it now for us, but let me invite you to kind of draw one or two of the points from that you think are particularly interesting to share with the viewers today.
That's I think it's like, as you say, a summary of these process researches we were doing. Some of them unpublished because then we were too lazy to put that into English and then to submit, etc. And I was not really. I've never been very much in the logic of publish or perish, because my university back then, they had no real interest in research and more interest in good teaching. So it's basically research about this question I mentioned before. How does it work? I mean, how the hell can something as simple as this work so often? Not always, but so often. And some, I think that back then in the 90s, some of the clues were, I think, 3 clues. I think one is still the relationship. I think a good solution-focused therapist is a very good listener. And Janet Bavalas has, and also Harry Corman, they have studied with microanalysis this years later. And basically they confirm this, that there's a difference in the way a solution-focused therapist uses paraphrases. It's a difference in how you, because we tend to pick the exact words that clients use and select the positive ones. So I think the first element is the relationship. In my own doctoral dissertation, we found out that we could more or less predict what clients would drop out when the dialogue was not collaborative, but it was more like a symmetric escalation between therapists and clients. Number one. The second aspect, and this was a research by Alberto Rodriguez Morejon about pre-treatment changes. So the fact that from the very first session, you ask people what improvements have been happening since they asked for the appointment or prior to the session, that makes a big difference. Clients who are able to describe relevant pre-treatment changes are much more likely to be successful cases at the end of therapy, some sessions later. So that's the second aspect, I think. And then the third aspect is goals. It's also part of Alberto's research and my own research. So having in the first session some clear, specific behavioral goals makes it much more likely to have a successful therapy. So that was basically what we have there in that paper. I think now I look at it from a slightly different perspective. For one thing is people change their way of thinking in a solution-focused session. So they, I think for me it makes sense to use Jerome Frank's concepts of remoralization. So usually people don't, I mean, at least in the context we did that research where clients come in voluntarily, people don't go to a therapist because they have problems. They go to a therapist because they are demoralized and they feel unable to solve them on their own. And so this option, this possibility of having a look at the other side and to realize that there are exceptions, that there are things they're doing well. We've also found this in the follow-up studies. I mean, three years later, we asked people, so what do you remember? What made a difference for you in the therapy? And of course, 3 years later, people are not able to remember specific techniques, but very often they say things like, well, I remember it was so important for me that you said that we were doing something well, for parents especially. So, or knowing that I was doing the right thing. So this ability to see not the negative aspect, but see the other positive one there. And with a colleague from Elche, Maricarmen Nape, we have validated for Spain the solution-focused inventory, which was developed by Anthony Grant in Australia, and which in a way measures that. I mean, your capacity to focus more on the resources and on the future, and to disengage from the problem rumination, you would say in cognitive terms. So this is one aspect. The other aspect I think that makes a difference also, I'm more and more convinced, is the emotional aspect. And I know Steve and Insoo had some problems theoretically with this notion of emotion. And I remember some EBTA presentations trying to deconstruct emotions, and well, there's no such a thing as emotions, and it's only in language. I think in that they were really wrong. I think that there's a lot of interesting research on emotions and social psychology in general, and it makes a difference. And for instance, I love Elliot Connie talking about how he gets couples to get positive feelings in the session. And I remember Eero Rikkonen, who's a Finnish colleague, he always talked about, well, you try to have sparks in the eyes of your clients. And this is something that we are studying now with analog research, so randomized, but with volunteers, with students, not with real clients. And we found that, for instance, the miracle question has this effect. It increases the positive effect, and it decreases the negative effect, especially. So to me, it's very clear that if you are able to create, in the way that Matthew Seligman would also say, if you get some enthusiasm in the session there, you would say, you get enthusiasm there, then your change comes more easily. So it's like, I think the second aspect we're paying more attention to. And then, of course, how you use language. So the slight variations in language, they have sometimes very dramatic effect. There's a lot of research out there also in social psychology and other fields, where if you change the wording, you change the results you get. So I think in a nutshell, that is what we found out. So relationship, listen to your client, really take it seriously that they have resources and that there are times when the problem is not happening and times when their preferred features are already happening. Don't forget to have clear, specific goals, but try also to create some emotion about that, and to maximize the likelihood of change. Yeah.
Well, Mark, you've done research on comparing solution-focused to problem-focused questions. You also have a paper as a study comparing brief systemic therapy versus CBT in routine clinical practice. And I have a copy. I was able to skim it a little bit before we started our meeting today. Could you sort of quickly say what you found there? I mean, my reading the research, and the meta-analysis, it keeps on saying that all approaches are effective and no one is more effective than any other. And then there's the issue of the length of sessions. Is solution-focused therapy actually briefer than other approaches? So what have been your findings and your take on it from your research, and also just your knowledge of the research?
Well, this research you're mentioning is basically done by a team in Catalonia, Carles Barsons, and he wanted to test. He wanted to demonstrate that brief systemic therapy, basically solution focused plus some strategic thinking also in there, can work in the public Spanish service. And I think the paper shows that it works, of course. As you are saying, I mean, whenever you compare to, like Bruce Wampold would say, to bona fide treatments, the most likely outcome is that they are basically equally effective, with some advantages for some clients, because clients' preferences are so important.
Right.
But basically, it does not make sense to say that one should be superior than other. And he found the same. And I urged him to also measure the number of sessions, because my hunch was, well, brief systemic solution-focused therapy would be as effective as cognitive behavioral, but I thought it would be briefer. And no, we did not find that. So they were equally brief, really, in part because of the constraints of the public system in Spain. They are able to give you many sessions, and they're usually scheduled at least 1 month apart. So in fact, both treatments were equally brief, 3 sessions on average. But that was a surprise, and I love doing research because of the surprises, especially what you don't expect to find.
Yeah.
On the other hand, let me share something unpublished with you, and hopefully published next year. You know, we ran a bibliometric study that we published some weeks ago. This bibliometric
that one I did read right before we met.
Okay. And I think it's not even on the web page, but I'll put it on the web page. So what we did, and this is done with my colleagues in Elche, with Mari Carmen Nape and her team, is to have a really deep search on 9 different databases, plus on the EBTA research list and the SFBTA research list, etc. And we were able to extract, I think it was 365 outcome research papers worldwide. And the initial interest of this study was, you know, in Spain, sometimes solution-focused therapy is still perceived as, you know, too American. It's so American, it's so simple, it's so, and it's put like together with positive psychology, which is also perceived, and in this case, I think maybe it's fair enough, as very American, very campus-focused, a lot of research with college students, etc. We wanted, and I have the feeling that it is not true. I mean, as Mark M knows, at EBTA meetings, you get people from all the world, and they're all doing very interesting stuff. And my feeling is that it's not true, that it's really being not only practiced more, but also researched more outside of the United States or Northern Europe. And in fact, what we found is, yes, it's more outcome research done right now in non-Western, non-democratic, not so developed countries, more than where it started. And really widespread. That was very nice to find out also. I think we found papers from 33 different countries, and in many different contexts. So psychotherapy, and only part of that family therapy, but a lot of research, outcome research in schools, a lot of outcome research with coaching, and then less in social work and communities and organizations. But it was very, I think, I really liked that research, because I think it really demonstrates how much the approach has spread worldwide, and that is generating research, outcome research on that. In that paper, we don't go into what the outcomes are. So we only say, well, it is being researched, and many people are doing research on solution-focused practices in social work, in coaching, and family therapy, and with groups and schools, and it's been done. But we did not go into the results. And this we are doing now, and I hopefully, before we start with the university again on Monday, we will submit a paper, like a follow-up on that. And it's not a meta-analysis, because we wanted to just have a look at this whole bulk of research. So there's 300 studies. It boiled down to 251, because for too many studies, we had too many missing data. But even so, for these 251 studies, what we found is that solution-focused therapy was superior than the comparison group, or superior at post-test as compared to pre-test in 86% of the studies, which is impressive. In fact, it is too good. It's too good. It can't be. And it was found inferior and inferior we mean inferior at least in one dependent variable and not superior in any of the others, okay? And inferior in only 3%, which again you say it can't be. It's too good. So what we have done then is have a look only at randomized controlled trials. So I think like 1/3 of the sample of studies are randomized controlled trials, almost 100, and there the percentages are more decent. Solution-focused therapy was found superior at least in one dependent variable without being inferior in any other. I think I have the data here, 72% of the studies, which is still a lot. And it was found inferior in only 8% of the studies. So we said, oh, we cannot publish this and no one will believe this. It's true. And so we had a look at, okay, let's have a look only at randomized controlled trials, but not where you compare solution-focused therapy with no treatment or with waitlist or with placebo. Let's have a look at what happens if you compare it with an alternative treatment. And there, finally, we got reasonable data. But still, I have it here, 38% of the studies found solution-focused therapy superior to the alternative treatment. And only 22% of the studies found it inferior. And then there we had the data, 40% with no differences or mixed differences, superior in one variable, inferior to other. But so very good results, really. I mean, much more than I expected. And if you compare solution focused with treatment as usual, it's 80 something percent of the studies show that solution focused therapy is superior than the treatment as usual, and no study in which the opposite happened. So, I mean, this is an argument if you want to conduct research at your agency and then maybe not work solution focused, and you want them to turn more towards solution and to be more strength based, and you want to do it, and you want to convince your bosses that this is safe. Well, hopefully this paper, when it is published, will provide some evidence that it's very unlikely that adding solution focused to the way people practice is going to be harmful in one way or the other. I know, I'm aware that in child protection there have been some issues around this, but our Tenerife study shows that the contrary happens. In our cases, we had less children removed from homes and no recidivism, less recidivism than in the control groups. So I'm very enthusiastic about this study, although the results are, as I say, too good, really.
I would.
One more thing, because as you know, I'm a very critical of orthodox solution focused therapy. I don't think that you should solution focused like in a sect, like in a very closed way. And I think that you need to be flexible and you need to adapt to the client, and that for Steve, the idea of fit was so central. And their clients are not solution focused, and maybe for them it makes more sense if you work more narratively, and I love to do that. And for others, it makes more sense if you really tell them and to give them precise indications as to what they should do, because they really want that from you, and they will not engage in a solution-focused conversation. So I'm very in favor of a more flexible and integrative approach. But this said, our data contradict this position of mine, because I expected that in those treatments where you mix solution focused with some other treatment, and in a high proportion of an important proportion of the studies that we had a look at, this happened. I expected that they would be more successful, so to say, than those studies where you have a pure version of solution focused therapy. But what happened? No, it did not come out as I expected. So in fact, in the majority of studies, it's just pure solution-focused therapy. And in fact, if you test only a technique or two, the effect of a miracle question only, or scaling questions only, then you are more likely to get negative results.
Yeah.
And so this goes against my beliefs. So I love this. I love this.
Well, Mark, I have one comment on those positive findings of that study. Wow, that's amazing.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. So I hope we get them published.
Yeah.
Because they are, as I say, too good. We have worked hard to get them not so good, but hopefully next year they will be out. And I mean, it's not a meta-analysis. It's not a Cochrane a revision, a systematic revision, but it's really all of the research, outcome research that has been produced worldwide, and trying to and I think evidence-based is a broad concept, and it should not be randomized controlled trials only, because as we mentioned before, in some contexts it's very difficult to get the funding, it's very difficult to get the permission, and even so we need some evidence to guide our decisions. So I think it's I was surprised. I was a bit disappointed that they were too good.
I think it's a great piece of work, Mark, that you've done pulling this together and drawing our attention to the way that there's all this research happening in languages other than in English. The boot seems to be on the other foot now. In the beginning, the people who came to the EBTA conferences came because they could speak English, as I think you observed, basically, or they were confident in English. But now there's research coming in from China, from Iran, from India, from so many places. And we now have the problem is that we have the problem of trying to kind of understand it and connect with it.
And so, and this is, I discussed this with my colleagues. It's like, on the one hand, it would be great if the Chinese and the Turkish and the Iranese, if they would publish more in the English language journals, because it would become much more visible. But then, of course, there's a very ethnocentric perspective.
Yeah.
And so, and sometimes to me, it looked initially like maybe what is happening is that they're producing a lot of research. They're publishing it in less important journals in their languages, and so maybe these studies are not as well done. But I don't think it's the case. So I think it's like humbling. It's like humbling to see that so many interesting things are done there. Yeah.
If I could just take a moment to have a little plug here for the Journal of Solution Focused Practice, of whom I'm one of the editors, and we are very keen to have. But both, we're trying to translate abstracts, at least, of English language papers into other languages, and that's not straightforward, but it's something we're succeeding in doing at some level. And we're also very keen to have abstracts and indeed papers in other languages that can be published. So we're trying to, make some little headway into this. Of course, it's an enormous challenge. If anyone's out there writing in other languages, please let the Journal of Solution Focused Practice know, because we'd be really keen to help people put their results and their work onto a bigger stage.
I think it's a great idea because of what you mentioned initially, that it's a pity that language, which is what we work with our clients, is so language-based, but then it becomes a problem in terms of dissemination, in terms of having the conversation. So it's great that you're doing that. That's really very important.
Yeah.
And I would like to give credit to Alistair MacDonald also, because he started with this idea of trying to get Chinese papers and have people translate the abstracts, and so he really did such a wonderful job for the EBTA evaluation list, and I think to a great deal our paper Biometric Study is very much indebted to Alistair, really. Yeah.
Can I? I'm sitting here listening to you three. It's like standing on the shoulder of giants, as I used to say. And I'm really because I saw some of the research that you recently did. I just wondered why. What is it about this approach that makes it so applicable universally, regardless of what language is spoken?
That's a good question. Because in psychotherapy in general, there's like a strong movement towards cultural adaptation. For instance, in the positive psychology field, they're struggling hard to adapt their ideas on about, I don't know, happiness, etc., to other cultures. in trauma therapy, for instance, also there which is a field that we are. Next year, I think we're going to publish many things. Next year, hopefully, we will publish the outcome of a randomized controlled trial for people who have suffered trauma, comparing solution-focused plus narrative with cognitive behavioral plus positive psychology with mindfulness. So, and that's done by a colleague in Chile, Felipe Garcia, and that was very well funded, and that will be coming out next year. Sorry, I got lost. What did I? Yes. So there's a lot of strong movement towards cultural adaptation of psychotherapy models. You can see that in many fields. With solution focused, I think this is not happening. So of the 365 articles of which we read at least the abstract and try to get more information, I think we found only one or two where there was really a cultural adaptation. And I think it's not necessary. Because for me, one of the big advantages of solution-focused therapy, it is that it is, I guess you would say that's impossible, but it's like value-free. It's so process-oriented. It's like a linguistic machinery that, I know the philosopher there, Mark M, will say, oh, you can't be value-free. But in a way it is. And that is why you can just ask the same questions in Spain and in India and in Iran and in Turkey and in Chile. You have to pay attention to the linguistic nuances, but the questions are open-ended, and the only assumption, the only value we have there is that people are capable, people have resources, and we are curious about how they are able to do things well when they do them well, and we're curious about their dreams. And I think that's a big advantage. And I think that is, but it's just a speculation, but I think that is why it is really so widespread and why it is working so well in many different contexts and many different cultures, because I don't think you need a cultural adaptation, really. You need to find the best way to ask the same questions in a very simple way. So how do you cope? You need to have, in Spanish, a good way of saying that's easily understood. But once you have that, you don't need to, no.
Yeah. It involves curiosity and leading from behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for me, that's also a political issue in a way. I mean, I do a lot of training for public agencies, because for me to think in solution-focused terms and to use solution-focused therapy has also to do with being nice to your users, to not be in the position of an expert who tells you what to do. If you think of social services or child protection, you have to do this, that. It takes you out of that position, and it creates really an egalitarian situation. Well, with all the inbuilt differences, but it creates a very different kind of approach. And I find it difficult with medical doctors. Medical doctors are difficult to get into that position, because they, in a way, they're so trained, though hardwired to find out what is the real stuff and this is it. But for me, it's a political thing. It has to do with in general, doctors and professionals being in a way nicer and more cooperative with people. And again, I think this is also very appealing. It's appealing. I would say, I would love to go to Iran or to Turkey. I heard Matthew in the conversation with you, and I know he loves Istanbul and Turkey. I would love to go there, just to find out, because I think in countries where you don't have a full democracy or no democracy at all, there's a great appeal of solution-focused therapy. I remember the first time I did the training in Chile. That was, I think, in 95 or 96. So Pinochet, the dictator, was still around, okay? So I gave this, I think, 20-hour training in solution-focused therapy. And the interesting thing is that afterwards, some people approached me and they said, oh, yes, the solution-focused therapy, it is so very much the way we think. You have to do one good deed every day. So they were right-wing Catholic extremists, but they left the approach. But then and a different group of people approach me and say, "Oh, we left this. It is so revolutionary. This solution-focused thinking."
Yeah.
And I think they got a better understanding of what it is. So I think part of it is also this potential for, I don't know, to start dialogues that have the potential to transform reality. And again, I think it's my passion nowadays that people do things different so that it has an impact on as many people as possible. In my private practice, I don't see many clients a week because I'm also teaching and doing research. But if you are able to help professionals to work more collaboratively and more strength-oriented with their users and in their teams, in their context, that has a very big effect. And I think that's nice.
You mentioned Matthew. Do you want to take this opportunity to plug your book with Matthew?
Yeah. I love this book.
I did too. I highly recommend it to people.
No, it's nice if you say it, but I know it sounds bad if I say it. But
everybody out there and watches this, I recommend this book. Can you see the title? Let me get it on the.
Can you read it to us? It's changing.
It says Changing Self-Destructive Habits. Subtitle: Pathways to Solutions with Couples and Families.
Yeah, we worked very hard on that book. And we got so enthusiastic. Well, you know Matthew. I mean, he's so enthusiastic with everything. So
yeah, as he says, he's a pathological optimist.
Yeah. And I am not, but I love to work with him because then I get it's contagious, you know.
Yeah.
And we get really, really drawn by the book. And we had a big problem then because we provided so many cases and detailed case descriptions that the book was far too big. And then I think at the end we had to leave out half of those beautiful case examples, all real cases and very interesting. And then we had a hard time to leave so many things out. But I think it's a nice book because and I think it's still pretty modern. To see eating disorders and self-harming people and drug use and internet abuse, to see it from this perspective of self-destructive habits, and then to use solution-focused techniques, but also interventions to break the problem patterns and also to build social connections. Well, all this where Matthew's really an expert. Yeah. So I look forward. I mean, hopefully this pandemic is gone someday soon. I look forward to doing some seminars with Matthew again, or just some glasses of good wine, because he's a great cook, but he's also a great wine taster.
Yes.
He
knows his wine.
We have something in common. Well, I drink wine. I don't know if I know it very well, but I do like to drink it. I was going to ask you, Mark, in your latest research, and I actually did a bit of research. I know. So of all those trials that you looked at, 46% apparently one-to-one sessions, groups 39%, and families only 4%. Why do you think that is? What's going on there?
Yeah, another surprise. I mean, solution-focused therapy was born within the family therapy field.
Yeah.
At the Berg Family Therapy Center. In Spain, at least, it is seen as part of the family therapy movement. And only 5% of the published outcome research is on solution-focused family therapy or solution-focused work with families, and another 5% with couples. I don't know. It could be in part because other family therapy models are more fashionable. I mean, if you think of addictions, etc., like multi-systemic family, things like that, could be. But what I take from this finding is that we need to do more of it. We need to do more of it, and maybe there's also a problem. I think the people at the BFTC, also the people at Brief, I think they tend to invite only those people who are really interested in therapy. So they're very likely to conduct sessions with only one client. I personally practice a different way. I try to always have some member of the family there. So the person wants therapy, and he says, well, basically he's feeling depressed and anxious lately, etc. If he has a partner, I try to have the partner in the first session also. And of course, if the parents are worried about a son, a daughter, I try to have all the family in the session, very much like Matthew does. And this makes the session a bit more complex to handle. You need to be able to move well there with in between. It makes it makes for a bit longer sessions, but in my experience, but this is not research, it's just a clinical experience, it also makes for shorter therapy. And it also helps with relapse prevention. Because if you not only have this person who is, let's say, depressed or has these obsessions or has whatever problem, but you also have his couple partner, that will be helpful. And if you have some other family members, they will be helpful. So I think to have some more family members in there, just as people who are able to help you as co-therapists, people who have more resources, not like in the family therapy tradition, because you think that they're part of the problem, the real cause is the conflict they have there and the power fights. No. In fact, what I love most doing right now, these last 10 years maybe, is working with couples. I find couple therapy very interesting. Difficult to do research on. So maybe this is also a reason now that I think of it. If you conduct studies on family therapy and couple therapy, you need some other measures. If you want to really show that, for instance, the couple dynamics have changed, you need some other measures probably. To measure the family, the therapeutic alliance, for instance, with families is more complex than with individual sessions. So, in general, to do research with families, with couples, is more complex than to do it with individuals. And it's also more complex, I think, than to do it if you have like a group of college students who are anxious, and you do a solution-focused program to help them deal with that. So yeah, maybe that's also part of it. But I think we need to do more, because it's like a bit like solution-focused has lost itself a little bit in this widespread evolution, and I think we should try to get a little bit back to where we started. Just work with families, difficulties, and help them create solutions.
I think so. Me and you, Aisha, are in the minority because we do family work, Mark, and do a lot of online sessions at the moment due to the pandemic. And I know that from your research, only a small amount were online sessions. Mm-hmm. And I get what you're saying about having that extra member of the family, because then I don't have to ask someone to suppose what the other person would react, because they're there to tell me.
Yeah. Plus, Plus, you have another change factor, which is that you are asking the wife something, and the husband is hearing your question, your response, and you can still ask the wife, so what do you think he will notice when you, and you ask her first, and then you confirm with him, so you have double information. So it's so powerful. I think because like our colleagues at Brief do, which I mean I love them. I think they really do great job in keeping things simple. But for instance, I still believe a lot in the power of homework tasks, because my clients at least, they like, some of them, not all of them, but they like homework tasks. And sometimes if you have a bad session, a good homework task can really make the difference. Okay, but what I was going to tell you is that with couples, for instance, more and more often, if you get this conversation going there, certainly you don't need homework, because already they have changed in the course of the conversation. Not just they have started to think in a different way, and also we have different emotions, but because we have this wonderful interaction there. And I like to look at this from the point of view of theory of mind, which is a concept from developmental psychology that I wasn't aware of. And I came across it some years ago only. And I think if you have a conjoined session, a conjoined solution focused session, you're helping them to create a theory of the mind interactionally, which strengthens their resources and makes them more resilient. In fact, so it's more complex. Sessions are a bit longer. Maybe you can also charge more for your session if it's private. It's worth it. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we have actually come to the end,
wow.
guys. Sorry.
Oh, it's so fun.
I'm sorry. And I know that the Mark M and Joe and Gil probably had so many questions to be asked, and we have had many people watching this evening with so many questions. But I've had to just kind of apologise and say sorry, run out of time. But any last words for Mark before we draw to a close? I'll go with Joe first.
Yeah, again, thank you, Mark. I know I emailed you out of the blue. I saw your research. I thought this is fascinating. Hopefully at some point in the future, the medical world in the UK will start to look at the research that you're doing and other research to say, actually, this is worth giving it a go. And thank you for all the research, and thank you for being such a charming guest, and my charming co-hosts.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've sat here in awe of the three of you. It's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been I was looking forward to this conversation because I really miss the EBTA conferences so much. Because that's where you always learn from people. You can talk with people. So I was looking forward to this conversation also because I had seen some of your conversations with Matthew, with Elliot, and it's been a great pleasure, really. So thank you so much for having me. Really, thank you so much for your questions.
Shall we go to Gil, Mr. Gil Green?
It's been great to meet you personally, Mark. Like I said at the beginning, I feel like I know you through Matthew Seligman. We've had several conversations about what he's done with you, and not just the book, but I think he's come to Spain like every year for the last several years, and he's always spoke highly of you and the work you do there. And I want to commend you for your research and contributions to solution-focused therapy. It's invaluable, the work you're doing there.
Thank you.
I'd second that. And Mark, it's great to see you. It's such a long time, several years since our paths have crossed at an EBTA, and I hope it won't be too long before we can get together again.
Hopefully. Sure. Yes. It will happen.
Well, I know I was in awe of all four of you having a conversation, and me looking at the private comments that Bless Mark was writing for me as he usually does, and I love him so much for that, helping me in the background as he does, and kind of keeping an eye on the comments. But I was intently listening, and I've just learned so much, and it's just given me another push to make sure that I read more. Because Joe usually reads and then summarizes things for me, but actually I'm quite interested in reading your papers now. So thank you very much. Can I just ask you guys to just stay behind just for a minute to say goodbye on a personal note, and to everybody else, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time on FBS Chat. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.